all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We also want to thank Eisenhower Center. It's a brain injury recovery center. Learn more about eisenhowercenter.com. They're located in Michigan and in Florida. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. Contact us if you'd like to be a sponsor on Veterans Radio, and let's move on to our program. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio Colonel Thomas J. Gordon, United States Marine Corps retired. Tom, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hey, thanks, Jim. This is an honor and pleasure to be here.
Well, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about your military career, a book that you've written on Marine Maxims, turning leadership principles into practice, and a little bit about what you're currently doing at the Citadel. So we got a lot of ground to cover. But how did a nice boy like you from Boston, Massachusetts, end up in the Marine Corps?
End up in the Marine Corps or end up at the Citadel?
Well, let's start with the Citadel, because that is where you started this journey.
Right. So, I tried to get into the Naval Academy. I wasn't smart enough, but I really wanted to be a Marine. And I did not come from a military family, but my stepfather was a Boston cop, and he was a former Marine. And I was acquainted with some former Marines in the area, all cops, and they had worked for some Citadel graduates, and they recommended I check the place out. So I looked at VMI and I looked at the Citadel and threw my name in, and it all worked out. No regrets whatsoever. But I went to the Citadel for the sole purpose of being a Marine. I was at least blessed with, at age 17, I knew what I wanted to do.
Well, it does make a big difference, and it also kind of shows the power of connections and networking where, friends of your stepfather sort of said, hey, check out the Citadel. Otherwise, you would have never probably heard of it.
I had not. So, and a lot of folks ask me about, why didn't you go to Norwich, being from Boston? And I always answer the same way. I'm like, hey, have you all seen Charleston?
True enough.
It's my wife and my favorite city in the world, and we've lived all over the world. So I served in the Marine Corps for 30 years. As you know, after 30 years, they take you out back and they shoot you. And, that happened in June, and I woke up in Valhalla, and it looks an awful lot like Charleston, South Carolina, in the Citadel campus.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little later because you are the Commandant of Cadets at Citadel now, just, a brand new transition for you. And it's going to be great to learn a little bit more about Citadel and in Charleston, South Carolina, and sort of what the Commandant of Cadets is responsible for. But let me back up.
Sure.
You spent 30 years in the Marine Corps, a lot of it in Tank Battalion with service in all the major hotspots over the last 30 years. Tell us a little bit about those experiences.
Well, as you said, I was a tanker in the Marine Corps. I have to say I wanted to always be a Marine, but I never thought I would do 30 years. So my grand plan was I was going to do 4 years in the Marine Corps and transition into federal law enforcement. So when I was at TBS, I went there because I really wanted to be a grunt, and my roommate really wanted to be a tanker, and we had a great time. We hit it off together, and as you know, there are very few tankers in the Marine Corps, very few slots. So we thought that the quality spread was going to work out in our favor, and we could both continue our friendship and continue to serve together. So we both put in tanks, and ironically enough, I got tanks and he got infantry.
The military thinking it's got a better way.
Absolutely, you know, and his name is Chris Gideons, probably one of our most decorated veterans, and certainly made huge contributions to the global war on terrorism, and was a remarkable infantryman. Finished up, you know, as a regimental commander out there in Camp Pendleton, and as the assistant division commander for 1st Marine Division. And things worked out for me pretty well too. I got to command 1st Tank Battalion, and it was the best job I ever had. You know, I picked tanks because, you know, I wanted to lead Marines and I wanted to fight my own tank, and I thought it would be a lot of fun, and it was an absolute blast. As you've mentioned, got to be stationed on 29 Palms a few times, married a remarkable woman who actually accompanied me to 29 Palms. It's a tough place to bring a brand new bride, especially from Charleston, South Carolina, and an even tougher place to, you know, have middle schoolers when we came back as a battalion commander. But no better place to command, no better place to train, no better place to lead Marines. And I also served in 2nd Tanks as a company commander, and did my 06 command at Camp Lejeune. I was basically my entire career was either I was in command or I was a 3. So my command opportunities were within the tank battalion. Again, great opportunity. And then my time as an operations officer, I was spent a lot of time over in Japan, Okinawa. So I was the current operations officer for 3rd MEF and the G3 for 3rd Marine Expeditionary Brigade, and ended up in a lot of time in the Middle East. So I was the MARCENT, the Marine component, the Central Commands. I was their G3, the Director of Operations. And as a colonel, I commanded in Camp Lejeune, had an incredible opportunity to transition the MEF headquarters group into the MEG, the information group, and after that, as a colonel in post-command time, I got to spend a year up in New York City on the Council on Foreign Relations. That was an amazing opportunity, and no good deed going unpunished. I was the MILSEC, or the Chief of Staff, for the 37th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Neller. So I did my payback for New York City in spades.
Oh yeah, you're going to pay for that. So they pulled you into an assignment you never really wanted or asked for, but I'm sure it was interesting.
I never interviewed for the job, never asked for the job, but I couldn't imagine anything more professionally rewarding than being able to serve in that capacity. General Neller's an amazing boss. I was his 3 when he was a 3-star, and he has a sense of humor, so he picked me to be the MILSEC, and we served together for the majority of his time, for his tenure as the commandant. But that was some demanding times. You know, there's a tremendous amount that's put on those service chiefs. You couldn't believe how hard they work, and General Neller's the hardest working man I know. Tough boss, but nobody cares more than General Neller.
Well, and then you had an assignment that sort of relates to what you're doing a little bit today, maybe, where in July of 2019, you assumed the duties as the director of the Marine Corps Command and Staff College. Again, a long way from Boston, Massachusetts, and what you thought you were going to do, isn't it?
It was actually, you know, God has a plan, right? So after my time with General Neller, you know, he retired on June 11th of 2019, and I was done at that point. You know, it was that was an extremely demanding billet, but the Marine Corps asked that I consider hanging around for those final 2 years as the director of the Command and Staff College. That took me about, I don't know, between 5 and 6 seconds to say yes, because I couldn't imagine a better last lap in the Marine Corps than to work with and being able to train, coach, and mentor the future battalion and squadron commanders of the Joint Force. So Candace and I moved from the D.C. area. We were a couple of blocks from the Pentagon when I was the MILSEC, but we moved down to Quantico, Virginia. They gave me a general officer house, just proving that I hadn't found the limit to the Marine Corps sense of humor, but I was pretty damn close. but we got to work with some absolutely amazing civilian and military faculty, and it really set me up for success being able to make this transition to this job.
Right. And the other, sort of full loop thing is, I'll go back to your original comment which I let pass, but now I can't. Hey, I wasn't smart enough to get into the Naval Academy. Well, now they've put you in charge of the Staff College. So, there's a full loop going on here, isn't there?
Absolutely, and I like to use the analogy of a leadership toolbox, right? So after 30 years, you acquire a leadership toolbox. So the 3-year Lance Corporal walks into your office, and you reach down, and lo and behold, you get the right tool to fix the problem. The 15-year Major comes in, you reach in there, you get the tool, you know exactly how to fix the problem. The PhD comes walking into your office, and I would have to fumble around quite a bit looking through the box.
That's where you grab the hammer.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I can attest that there is no tool for a PhD. They're all special.
Let me transition from this, because again, I've got a lot of questions.
Please.
It's all that experience in these different roles over 30 years that kind of lead to Marine Maxims turning leadership principles into practice. Talk to us a little bit about, hey, I've collected enough of this stuff. I want to pass it along to others. I'm going to write a book.
Well, that's actually how it came together. Just like I never intended to serve 30 years in the Marine Corps, I really didn't set out to write a book. But what I did do when I started at the Citadel back, 34 years ago now, back in '87, they issued me, one of those ubiquitous green-covered, cloth-covered notebooks, those 5x8 notebooks that everyone carries around. I call it my analog brain. But I had a special one, and it was my leadership journal. And I started it when I was at the Citadel, and I carried it with me for, about the first 20 years. And how it worked was this. Whenever I worked in close proximity to a leader I really respected, whatever attribute it was that drew me to his or her attention, I would just journal it. I said, if I'm ever in command, if I'm ever in charge, I'm going to do that. And I logged it in. But, after 20 years, it wasn't all unicorns, rainbows, and parades, right? I did work for my fair share of tools. And whenever I worked for, I guess this is going to be live, so let me choose my word carefully.
Please do.
A martinet. How about we say that? I'll describe them as a martinet. Whenever I worked for a martinet, I would just flip the book over, and I would write in the back of the book, if I'm ever in command, I promise I'll never do that. Well, after 20 years, the front of the book met the back of the book, and I guess I had a charmed Marine Corps career because I had more entries in the front than I did in the back. But if I was to be honest, I would have to say I learned far more from the entries in the back of the book than I did the front. So now I'm a battalion commander, and I had this stream of consciousness. So I took that green book, and I turned it into an outline. And I broke it up into my call sign back then was Mufasa. So it was affectionately known as Mufasa's Maxims, and it was just kind of my lessons that I was passing on to my lieutenants. So I had this, we would go twice a year. We'd do an offsite, a PME, a professional military education event, and I'd take my lieutenant someplace, and we just go through them all. And I just kind of walk through my lessons on what I learned. And the lesson was, it's like, hey, this is my leadership primer, but hopefully the takeaway is you need to start your own leadership primer. You can take these lessons if you want, and you can incorporate them and roll them in and make them your own, right? Or start anew. The truth of the matter is they say that less than 1% of the population is capable of an original thought. I consider myself a proud member of the majority, and these were just different lessons I picked up from other people, and I just encouraged my lieutenants to do the same. So when I was up as a colonel, though, it was a little different. I'd already filled up my book, but now I was commanding through commanders. And I continued to journal, but now as a colonel, I found myself, instead of writing entries in the book saying, geez, if I'm ever in command, I hope I'm going to do this. I ended up, serving some absolutely remarkable battalion commanders, and I found myself journaling their attributes and saying, geez, I wish when I was in command I had done that. And I try to continue to collect those up. And as I mentioned, the Marine Corps gave me the incredible opportunity to spend a year up on the Council on Foreign Relations back in 2016. And when I was up there, I had some time, more time than I ever had in the Marine Corps. So I spent some of that, and I went back to that outline, and I finished, and I turned it into a manuscript. Of course, Disney may have a problem with Mufasa, so I couldn't call it Mufasa. Right. Mufasa's Maxims anymore, but I did reach out to the Naval Institute Press after I left the Commandant's office. I didn't want to publish from the Commandant's office. I just didn't think that wouldn't have been right. I'd never want. The thing that's beat into your head as a military officer from day one is never self-promote and never use your position for your own gain. But in academia, professors are supposed to create knowledge and then promulgate that. So,
and I think here what you've done here, and it's very readable. Is pass along lessons that you've learned, and we all, as we move on in our stages in life, hope that we're doing that, whether it's by our example or here taking the time to put them down on paper. And some of this is, people would read and say, well, yeah, I know who John Maxwell is, in leadership, and you make this distinction that you saw over time between sort of leadership and management, and are you born with it, or do you have to grow into it? I mean, these are all ideas and concepts that I think anybody struggles with if they have any self-reflection. And I think you've done a great job of presenting these maxims, both in sort of segments, leadership philosophy, toxic leadership, building cohesion, a whole series of thematic issues. But in each subchapter, if you will, I like the concept of saved rounds and recommended reading. Can you tell us a little bit about where that came from?
Well, as you mentioned, so none of these maxims are either new nor novel, right? Nor are they ready-made solutions or quick fixes. When it comes to leadership, I believe there's no shortcuts of fixed formulas. But what I did try to do is take these lessons, which I believe are maxims, they're truisms, and kind of trace back to their origins. So I did some research. I do a lot of reading on leadership. If you were to look at my bookcase behind me right now, it's just full of tons of books. As you say, Maxwell. I read a lot of books on business. I read a lot of books on sports. I read books on religion. And again, I'm just trying to go back in there, and I'm trying to find the taproot, right? So every book I read, I flip to the back of the book and the bibliography of the works cited to find my next one. And that's what I try to do with the maxims. Was I said, hey, I learned this particular maxim from General Neller, or from General Dunford, or from General Kelly, or some of the remarkable leaders I got to serve with over my 30 years. But where did they get it from? And, what influenced them, and what books did they read? And so I tried to take at the end of each chapter, or end of each maxim, I gave some save rounds, which was just some practical tips on how they could implement it. But then also, if they wanted to learn more about it, I just shared, my bibliography, where I got this information from, who has a supporting opinion or who has a contrarian opinion to it. So I just try to lay that out. The idea was that this was supposed to be a professional development tool for future leaders, and it was just my lessons passed on, aggregated, so that a new lieutenant or a new battalion commander, and quite frankly, I tried to tailor and scale it to both a brand new company grade officer or a potential battalion commander, I think, could benefit from the lessons, because I know.
Well, and I don't want the veteran radio listening audience, and we're talking to Colonel Thomas J. Gordon, U.S. Marine Corps retired. I don't want them to get thinking this is only a military book. I read this and saw a lot of value in it for veterans starting businesses, for entrepreneurs, for folks who are trying to read about leadership maybe in a different context that would resonate with them. So I thought it was real readable, Tom, and not something that was just a professional military education tome.
Well, thanks, Jim. And I did try to go through there, and one thing we have a horrible habit as military professionals is we talk in acronyms and we have jargon. So I did have some friends of mine, shout out to my classmate Barry Dorsey up there in New York City. He's a screenwriter up there. And I gave the manuscript to Barry. I'm like, Barry, I need you to translate this thing for me. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, just read through it, and everything that you don't understand, every bit of jargon, acronym you find, just go ahead and circle it and help me, because I would like to open this thing up, open the aperture up to a wider audience, because I agree, Jim, thank you. I think leadership's leadership, and some of these lessons I think will resonate whether or not you're on the Amazon floor or if you're leading an infantry platoon.
I want to mention a couple of chapter titles. We won't have time to get into them the way I was hoping, because I want to talk about the Citadel. But I think this will let our veteran radio listeners go hear this and go, yeah, that's something I'd like to read, because that I can relate to. And these chapter titles really hit me. Chapter 7 is Treat Them Like Adults, and They Will Act as Adults. That really resonates with, I think, a lot of folks, and certainly in the Marine Corps with a whole bunch of brand new grunts. Treating them like adults isn't really the first maybe reaction. So, again, I think that's something that occurs in every business, every startup. Chapter 9 is Don't Be an Ass. Oh, that one rings true, too, in just the world in general, but you talk about command structures that you saw that you didn't want to emulate as, hey, I don't want to be that ass. Chapter 47, I think, hits a lot of folks too in the business world, where you go, which is about don't be in a hurry to make a bad decision. And sometimes the speed and the pace of things kind of head you in a direction of, I got to make this decision today, but I know it's a bad one, but I'm making it today. And certainly in the military, that can have very fatal consequences. So there's a lot of good information in here that I think really applies to anybody, Colonel, and you've done a great job to making it readable. But it's really not a book that you pick up and read from page 1 to the end all at once, is it?
No, I didn't design it that way. I would recommend you read the first 4 chapters in sequence, but afterwards it's kind of set up as a daily reader, or you can actually flip through it and organize. It's organized by either personal or professional development, and then where you may be at any particular time in your professional journey. So if you're about to take over a new organization, there's a couple of chapters in there. If you're about to turn over an organization, there's a chapter on successorship in there. If you're struggling, with some disciplinary issues, you can refer to that. But also, if you're talking or some legal issues, there's a chapter on that. But also, how do you do an effective performance evaluation system? How do you do an effective reward program? I tried to take some of the best practices I learned. You hit 3 Maxims. I'll just hit really briefly, just in reverse order as you laid them out. So, no decision before its time was something that I originally picked up from Colonel Stilwell. He had the 22nd MEU, but the guy who put the fine point on that was General Beidler, Lieutenant General Smoke Beidler. I worked for him when he had the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, and he really taught me about no decision before its time. How much time do I have to make this decision, and whose authority does this decision rest with? And it was very helpful to me, because what I did see during my 30 years was the worst thing you can do as a commander is be in a hurry to make a bad decision and then have to walk that back, right? So making sure you take all the time and all the resources to be able to see the problem in the round to make a sound decision. Don't be an ass. Well,
you do have to tell people this.
Well, you do, unfortunately, right? Because especially, people do what people see, and unfortunately, if you look at how we develop young second lieutenants in the Marine Corps, the leadership that has been modeled to them from when they're a candidate all the way through like their TBS experience. Back in my day, right, there were a lot of assholes. I'm sorry, you can beep that out if you have to, right? But that's what we thought we were supposed to be, because that was what was modeled for us, was that leadership by fear and intimidation is what we saw. Now, we're blessed right now. The basic school is being led by Colonel Reggie McClam right now, and the future of the Marine Corps looks really bright. They don't have to worry about that. But quite frankly, a lot of young lieutenants, that's what they see. That's what's modeled. So I try to remind them that, no one ever wants to work for an ass.
And you don't have to do that to get ahead.
Right. You can be firm, you can be demanding, but you don't have to be an asshole about it. I'm sorry, you had to beep that one out too.
No problem. and then, as I say, the one that you wouldn't think you'd give to somebody with young Marines, but hey, treat them like adults.
Right. So it's trust, right? Reciprocity. How do you build trust in an organization? Well, first you have to extend it. I like to tell everybody that, loyalty is a result. It's not a requirement. If you're ever in an organization or you find yourself working for a boss who's demanding loyalty, it's time to, be worried, be concerned. But in the Marine Corps, we do have a bad habit in the Marine Corps of managing to that bottom 2 or 3%. Right, a lot of our policies are directed at trying to curb the behavior of a malign few. Right, and it inadvertently paints the entire organization with that same brush. So I remind my folks, I do it here at the Citadel, quite frankly. Is if we treat them like adults, they'll act like adults. When one of the commands I had was I was the first commander of the Black Sea Rotational Force. It was a special purpose MAGTF that went into Eastern Europe. We did 12 countries while we were there, and I think Marines are going to be telling stories about that deployment for the next 40 years, and every time they tell a story, it'll be better. But I had an extremely liberal leave policy when we were over there. I treated the Marines like adults. I told them, I said, this is an opportunity to be ambassadors in green and represent the service in your country well. And I allowed them to go out there and drink. There's going to be drunks. And how many liberty incidents we had during that deployment? We had absolutely none. And again, we treated them like adults, and they rose to meet our expectations.
Well, as you say, trust is really the key there, and it flows both ways. You have to trust them; they ultimately have to trust you.
Reciprocity, right?
Yep. And I want to before we come to a conclusion, maybe on this first part here, and we're talking to Colonel Thomas J. Gordon, United States Marine Corps retired, who wrote Marine Maxims: Turning Leadership Principles into Practice. I wanted to point out to folks that this is printed by the Naval Institute Press. I don't really know if it's on Amazon. It may not be, but if you go to www.usni.org, you'll be able to find it there, and it's also available in ebook fashion, which I think is great. Is that the primary source for getting your hands on it, Tom?
If you are a member of the Naval Institute Press, I strongly recommend you go and buy the book from them. You'll get it at a significant discount, but it is available on Amazon, Books A Million. It's out there on all the major prime vendors out there. So, and it's I'm humbled by the rollout. It's exceeded all expectations going out. So, hopefully it'll be of interest to future leaders.
I think it will, and I appreciate the time you've given Veteran Radio today, Tom, to talk about the Marine Maxims.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, NVBDC.org, Eisenhower Center, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. They keep us on the air, as does your support. Go to Facebook, go to veteransradio.net, and support our efforts. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, Take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.